Jaguar is about to make a big leap, no pun intended. They're about to pretty much start from scratch and release a car that almost no one expects to be successful. But some people don't realize that 8 years ago, Jaguar pretty much made the car that everyone wanted. A loud, beautifully yet aggressively designed, absolute track scalpel that you could still take to get the groceries. But no one cares. We've heard from Jaguar themselves on what they want to do. We've talked about what Jaguar could do. And so to close out this trilogy, so to speak, let's talk about what Jaguar did do, which was make a car that took the best of the CT5V Blackwing and the 911 GT3. This is the Project 8. So to understand what Project 8 is, we firstly have to understand SVO, Jaguar Special Vehicle Operations. This was more or less JAG's attempt at creating something similar to a BMW M division or Porsche GT division, because prior to SVO, they never really had a public-facing, dedicated team to creating limited run special edition sports cars and halo cars. And one of the primary people responsible for the birth of SEO was Harry Metcalf, or Harry's Garage on YouTube, whom I met via tailgating him in a Ferrari 12 Cilindri on a Portuguese country road. We're more or less best friends. Harry has a more detailed first account on how he played a part in the creation of SVO, but from my perspective, Harry more or less wanted a ultra hardcore special edition limited version of the F-Type R just for himself. So he went to the Jag CEO at the time and told him, hey, if you make this car that I also coincidentally just kind of want, you'll literally sell all of them. And to prove it, I'll buy one myself. I'll be the first one to put an order down. And so the result of Harry essentially finessing Jaguar into building him the F-Type R of his dreams was the birth of the SVO program, the F-Type R based Jaguar Project 7, and then this, the Project 8. First things first, the 5-liter supercharged V8. We're making just about 600 horsepower and 500 plus pound-feet of torque. This is the same Ford-based 5-liter V8 that we know and love from the F-Type and other JLR products. But the first thing that surprised me with this car is how much more aggressively and violently this car pulls. You would really think that a 20 horsepower jump isn't that big of a difference, but you would be wrong, at least in this car. This car is also equipped with a titanium exhaust made specifically for the Project 8, but unfortunately this car is still new enough to where Jaguar implemented the software-based valve lock. So until about 4,000 RPM, the car still sounds pretty muffled, but once it does eventually open up, let's drop the revs here. It's notably louder than what you have in an F-Type R, which uses a stainless steel exhaust system. So don't get it twisted, this car will absolutely light up a neighborhood with ease. But speaking of which, I should probably show you instead of telling you. I think we should launch this car to 60 miles an hour. Let's do it. All right, 0 to 60 time. We're working with about 592 horsepower to be specific, 16 pound-feet of torque, all-wheel drive, ZF 8-speed torque converter, automatic. But we are on Cup 2s, so I'm not expecting the absolute best time, but from what I've seen, 3.5 without rollout is more or less the best time I think you can get with this car. So hopefully we get within that realm. 3.6, 3.7 I think would be fine, but under 4 seconds for sure. Let's do it. All right, there's no launch control sequence, so you just foot on brake, foot on throttle. Let's go! Whoa, Jesus. Ah, boy. That was good. That was good. I like that. Very fun launch control. That was 0 to 60 in 3.67 seconds. I'll take that, and I think that's perfectly valid for this not being on the absolutely best tires for a regular road. If we were on track, I think that'd make a huge difference. But 3.67, I think that's plenty solid for a car of this type. And it's also a lot of fun to launch this car. You get bonus points for that. Power aside, there's absolutely no way to compete with something like a 911 GT3 without having your suspension absolutely dialed in. Otherwise, having all that power is effectively meaningless, and Jaguar realized this. So let's get this thing up on the lift and show you guys why you'd be spending 200 grand, maybe even more, on a Jaguar XE. In the shop with the Jaguar XE, aside from developing bespoke body panels for this car and retrofitting a V8 to fit into this platform, the bulk of this car's development cost was in configuring a track-ready suspension setup for this car. The XE is set up with multi-link front and rear control arms, and these are bespoke aluminum control arms with shims fitted in to adjust camber. But from factory, this car carries about 1.5 degrees of camber on the front of the car. But the highlight of this car's suspension setup are the Bilstein adaptive dampers. This kit will cost you thousands, and I mean thousands, per corner. This is no laughing matter, folks, and I can certainly tell you that Porsche was not laughing, as this is more or less the same setup used in the 991 Porsche 911 GT3 RS. These are all aluminum dampers that you can technically make adjustments to yourself, but if you can afford an XE like this, why would you? Compared to a standard XE, the springs in this car are about 450% stiffer, and that's because this car is about as heavy as a Tesla Model 3 Performance or a 992.2 Turbo S Cabriolet, however you want to look at it. And so you need that stiffness to carry that weight around a track and do so efficiently. But unlike Porsche, who will gladly let your back be blown out, Jaguar still wanted this to be a somewhat comfortable daily driver. And so there's actually a helper spring above the primary damper spring to help give the car a more supple and compliant ride. But when you're ready to take your Project 8 to the track, you can use your C-spanner to drop this car an additional 15 millimeters and achieve a more firm and planted ride to achieve the most optimal lap record in your grocery-getting sports sedan. We did reach out to our Jaguar PR rep for more technical support, but they actually just quit. Literally yesterday, they quit. That is not a joke. I know I'm doing like a whole Savage Keys bit right now. That's not a joke. They quit. But yeah, let's get this thing back out on the road and put this suspension to the test as we carve through some absolutely riveting 30-degree Floridian elbows. Let's do it. The transmission is made by ZF. It's an 8-speed torque converter automatic, pretty much identical to what you have in an F-Type R, for example. It feels like more or less a copy and paste. And this isn't my favorite example of the ZF 8-speed. I think, once again, BMW is still got the best ZF 8-speed on the market, maybe aside from Porsche. But even on track, and especially for the street, it gets the job done, especially when paired with these epic exhaust responses. It really makes you feel like you're doing something. This is a rare example of me wishing that a car of this kind, a track day special, had a manual option. Firstly, I really do believe that the powertrain could handle it for sure. And Jaguar was still technically making manual cars in this era. Not a ton, but they do exist, particularly the F-Type, which came in manual form. Not many people bought that car. And I think it would just add an extra level of engagement that the ZF 8-speed just quite simply can't achieve. Now, the GT3 RS doesn't have a manual option anymore either, but their reasoning for that is that they want to achieve the best possible lap times. And so they not only put an automatic transmission in the car, but they put one of the best automatic transmissions ever in that car, hence the insane performance. So I feel like coming from their other cars like the F-Type, it seems like they didn't try to make the transmission in this car a bit more special and GT3 rivaling. And although I certainly do think for driving on the street, this ZF 8-speed is perfectly fine, I think for track use, this is somewhat of a weak point for the car. And so if you're not gonna put in the best possible automatic transmission, why not have a manual option too? When factoring in the relatively low weight for a big V8 all-wheel drive sedan with 4 seats, when going through the few corners you can find in Florida, the car stays absolutely planted. Turn in is really sharp, it's uber confident, and that's obviously due to the crazy suspension setup that this car has. And one thing I noticed is how confidently this car can power exit out of corners, and that's, you know, all-wheel drive, that's gonna help as far as doing that, but it's still a very rear-biased car. And so you have that little bit of help from the front wheels to help you power out of a corner confidently, unlike something like a CT5e Blackwing, for example. And that's where the 911 GT3-ness of this car starts to come out. Steering feel on this car is pretty interesting. It's a bit weightless on center, but once you really start pushing the car around, it tightens up. So it's responsive when you need it to, despite it being an electronically controlled rack. It's got some nice analog weight to it. I like the way this car steers for the most part. I think it's perfectly set up to help you handle these 30-degree Floridian apexes. And these bucket seats are also super comfortable, like genuinely very supportive, but also really comfortable. I could easily crush 1,000 miles in these, no sweat. So we can't talk about this car without addressing all the aerodynamics and mechanical engineering and obviously design choices they made to achieve this final result, because this is substantially different from a standard XE in so many different ways. So first things first, we have our hood made of carbon fiber, of course, but the entire front end is also made of carbon fiber because this design could not be achieved while also maintaining structural rigidity. So to achieve this design with these holes in the front bumper, you had to make it out of carbon fiber. And we also have this carbon front splitter here that is adjustable. You can move it forward a bit to increase your downforce and track performance. Pretty cool stuff. And back to this hood again, like I mentioned, it is carbon fiber, but we also have this intake duct right up here in the front to not only allow for more airflow for your big supercharged V8, and also better aerodynamics to help you reach that 200-mile-an-hour top speed that this car has, but it allows me to stick my microphone right in here and capture really cool supercharger whine. You can really hear the supercharger a lot more in this car because of not only this thing right here that allows more sound to be extracted from the vehicle, but there is no engine cover on this car as well, which also provides a little bit of sound deadening, so you get more of that traditional Hellcat experience. I like it a lot. Moving on to the side here, I love how Jag labels certain areas on this car to make sure you know exactly what's happening here. So we have this insane carbon fiber side skirt. This is one of the biggest side skirts I've seen on any car, period. But we have this label right here that says no step, just to let you know, don't step on this thing because it is carbon and it is rigid, but I mean, if you're, relatively big back, you could easily, knock this thing off of the screws that it's using to keep it in place. So don't step on that. And then the rear fender. This is just so good, so good. So obviously the rear is wider than what you have on a standard XE by about 70 millimeters or so. It's pretty nuts, but Jaguar obviously also had to flare this rear door to match the fender, which was an insane cost, I'm sure. But the result is just an absolute chonker in all of the best ways. Normally, I'm not a wing on a sedan type of guy. Even on cars like the GT3, I prefer the touring over the winged version. But for whatever reason, it kind of just works on the Project 8. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's really doing something for me. And there are versions of the Project 8 that I've seen without the wing, particularly Sam with see-through glass. His car does not have the rear wing, and it looks good, but I think it looks even better with this rear wing, which is adjustable. So if you want to achieve that lap record time, you can adjust it to increase your downforce by, I believe, a couple 100 pounds more. And then obviously continuing the theme of them labeling carbon pieces on the car to tell you what's going on, we have our tow thing right below the tow hook for the rear. And then titanium exhaust pipes looking absolutely beautiful and sounding absolutely beautiful as well. There's just one thing with this car from a design perspective that just totally doesn't make sense and boggles my mind based on everything we've talked about so far and all the crazy engineering they've had to do to achieve this final result. So after everything Jaguar did to make the Project 8 what it is, like retrofitting the bulkhead to fit the 5-liter V8 that was never designed to fit in this chassis, the insane race car GT3 RS rivaling suspension, redesigning the rear doors to match the extremely wide fender flares, the front and rear aero, everything they did to this car, you would think they would put a bit more effort in when it comes to the roof. But no, I think this is more or less exactly what you would get on a standard XE. They never offered a carbon roof option for this car, which is actually kind of crazy. You can get a carbon front bumper, but the roof is just kind of like this fixed glass panel with a mesh shade that you can open and close to let a bit less light in or a bit more light in. It just feels like they either ran out of development money for this car or just got lazy and maybe just forgot about the roof. But that would have really been the absolute cherry on top for this car from a design perspective. It's probably the worst thing about this car when it comes to the way it looks and the functionality of it all. But either way, still very fun car to drive, and a Jaguar is never going to be perfect, is it? Project 7 and Project 8 were ultimately limited edition run cars. Jaguar never really put their foot down to see how something like this would sell in the long term. But I think they 100% succeeded in not only creating a car that scratches all of my car guy itches, but building something that proves that you don't need a 3RS to go fast on a track. And I think if they were to do this again, they still probably wouldn't outsell an M3 or a GT car of some sorts. But I think if they did actually try to sell this car, I think maybe more people would pay attention and recognize this car for what it is, which is low-key one of the most underappreciated sports sedans of all time. Thank you to the owner of this beautiful Project 8 for letting us come down and film it. More videos on the way. Talk to you guys in the next one. I gotta enjoy this supercharger for the few hours I have left with it. Oh.